Okay, let's get underway. Thanks for joining the webinar today. First, let me tell you a little bit about Managility. We're an international provider of tailored business intelligence solutions with offices in US, Australia, Hong Kong and India. And we assist organisations in improving their analysis and planning processes to achieve substantial ROI through tailored, innovative business intelligence solutions. We focus on two areas. First, insight. So dramatically improved insight into existing data by business user controlled reporting and dashboards. And secondly, foresight, giving clear foresight through effective planning, budgeting and simulation processes. We are different in that, as opposed to reinventing the wheel with another expensive software purchase, we focus on better using existing technologies and using open source or very cost-effective solutions where possible. And PCA, Predictive Customer Analytics, is one of these. Background, the most important recent developments in economics centre on the field of behavioural economics. The key insight of behavioural economics is that human choice is not completely rational. Economists used to assume that human beings were rational utility maximisers. That is, they always made rational choices that would increase the objectively measured economic benefit to them. However, some economists, most notably Dan Kahneman, have comprehensively proven that this is not the case and have shown how individuals and markets can and do act irrationally. And Kahneman has explained some of the psychological and behavioural phenomena that influence those economic choices. That doesn't help us much, simply acknowledging that people don't behave rationally. But the good news is this irrationality can actually be accurately modelled and predicted. That's where Professor Dan McFadden comes in. He pioneered the methods to do so in the 1970s. He predicted uptake of the BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transport in San Francisco, when it was first built, to an accuracy of within 0.1%. And he spent the next 30 years or so proving that this wasn't a fluke and applying his choice modelling methods to literally hundreds of consumer choice scenarios, culminating in his Nobel Prize in 2000. His methods involve gathering experimental data from surveys, which present realistic choices and realistic trade-offs between products or options. The real genius is in the way these experiments are designed and modelled, but in basic terms, they're surveys. They present real-world choice scenarios. So, can we really predict customer behaviour? The answer is yes. The current science is actually very good at predicting how humans will really behave in scenarios involving economic choices. And the science is proven, and it has been around for a while. You're probably wondering why this is not more widely known. The reason, really, is that choice modelling projects have historically been very expensive and taken a long time. So if you had a problem of a large scale, like you were predicting demand for $1 billion toll road before going ahead and spending that $1 billion and building it, you'd probably know about choice modelling and you would have used it. The good news now is that recently the costs and time involved in running these projects have decreased to a level that make them accessible and useful to all sorts of businesses. The costs are no longer millions, but tens of thousands, and the time involved is not years, but weeks. Managility's PCA offering is at the forefront of revolutionising the cost effectiveness of choice modelling through automation. What are these choices worth? Well, understanding how consumers will behave and why provides a tangible and immediate benefit to businesses in a range of situations. So what are the real business problems PCA is good at solving? Well, it can answer some questions such as what aspects of a product do my customers value when they're making a choice? How can I make my company's offerings more attractive? How can I make our marketing messages more effective? What changes can I make to my existing product to optimise revenue, profit or market share? What is the best response to a competitor's action, like their discount or promotion or new product? And is there a real demand for a new service or a new product that I'm thinking of launching? And PCA can help you to wargame or assess what-if scenarios. What if I change price? What if I change features? What would happen to market share? What if my competitor did likewise? what's the best response for me. And it's exceptionally good for modelling things you can't or won't test live in market. So most of the projects we work on test a broad range of configurations and price that you would never test in market for fear of damaging your brand or market share. For example, you wouldn't change your prices from very high to very low and then somewhere in the middle over the course of a few weeks. In many cases, that's simply illegal. Certainly offering one customer one price and another a different price. For similar reasons, it's exceptionally good for modelling uptake of brand new products that don't exist yet. A great example is a project I was involved in for a space tourism consortium. And of course, you can imagine there's absolutely no historical data for them to rely on when assessing willingness to pay or what features people appreciate in a space tourism package. So anyway, let's look at some practical examples here. First, I'd like to show you a short video.
The Australian Winter Festivals, glühwein and music and events and ice skating on the beach. Over 500,000 people attended. In just 2 years, the organisers established a successful event and created a new brand from scratch. Their success was almost effortless. It's even more remarkable when you consider the number of variables involved. Firstly, there was the choice of location. Then there was the size of the ice rink for the available budget, the price of a drink, the music, the time of year, the food, the attractions. On these variables alone, there are over 2 million ways the event could have been organised. How to pick the best one? Trial and error is clearly not viable, and neither is traditional market research. But there is a new approach known as choice modelling. By taking a small sample of people's decisions, choice modelling is able to predict the larger patterns of choice. And this model let the organisers determine the right combination to ensure the event was successful. And they didn't need to hire an army of economists or consultants. They did it themselves, using a new tool developed in Australia.
Now let's have a look at the model that was created for that project, for the Sydney Winter Festival project. If you didn't quite catch the gist of the video, it was about how we, through using PCA, modelled what mattered to people in terms of a whole range of features for a proposed winter festival, which was actually eventually run and run very successfully. So Managility's PCA will always produce a model in a way that's very easy for the customer to interrogate. So you'll always get some kind of model output or simulator that allows you to interrogate the model, to change things, to see what the effect would be in the way that's most useful to you. This is the output of the Winter Festival PCA project. Now, the Winter Festival people wanted a couple of questions answered, and they were, what features matter most to customers? How can we make trade-offs and compensate customers, or vice versa? For example, can we charge more if we give them more of a particular feature, or can we charge less if we remove certain features, or will demand be greater? And in a nutshell, what is the best configuration for the festival? So the experiment we conducted and the simulator we produced was a simple market share simulator. Now, there aren't in reality two competing winter festivals, but this type of simulator helps us to figure out which alternatives customers prefer and the strength of their preference. We start here with all the levels we tested set at the first level for each option. So it doesn't really tell us much. Each of the options are set to the same thing. Two competing options, 50% share prediction. However, what we can tell here is we see initially which attributes have the greatest effect on choice and which have the least. So you can see ice rink, choice of ice rink, whether no ice rink or large ice rink, has the greatest effect on choice, while children's zoo has the least effect on choice. Now, what I'll do is maximise one option and minimise the other. So I've just maximised option A. And of course, the preferred option shows everyone wants the most for the least. We can see that there are things we can do in order to maximise our profits, or we will see that there are things we can do in order to maximise our profits by playing with some of these features. Price of food, for example, is very important. We can see that increasing that will have more of an effect, potentially, than increasing the cost of drinks or the entry. Interestingly, okay, so if we increase the cost of food to, say, $20, our share drops quite a bit compared to the other option. Let's take it back down to $5. Interestingly, if we charge $5 or even $10 for entry, our share drops less. So it has not as much effect as the cost of food. Also, we can get rid of the curling, the children's zoo, even the free hot alcoholic drink, without too much of an effect on demand. All of these things involve substantial cost without a great effect on the attractiveness of the offering. We could even lose the live music and still not have too much of a market effect on our share, on our projected market share versus the other option. And what else did we learn? We learned that location is important as well, and that having EFT facilities is important. So we better do it at Bondi Beach. And even though hooking up EFT facilities is a pain, it's actually important to customers. This is showing us what's important to our customers. This is a simulator for an insurance company where we tested their product and the features of their product against a bunch of other products in the market. And this simulator shows the likelihood of choosing their product over all other products in the market. It's set at the minimum at the moment. So obviously high monthly fee, high access, and just the basics, no extras. The client here was most interested in segmentation, what meant the most to people at different life stages. So what we did is create filters that allow them to easily interrogate the model for different segments. So we have an aggregate model, that's for everyone, and we also modelled the data for particular segments. In this drop down here, you can see the segments that we recruited respondents from and created models for. So everyone, baby boomers, double income, no kids, 18 to 44, an older family with grown-up children or older children, single income, no kids, 24 to 44, and a family with young children. So let's have a look at singles. So we can see that on aggregate, what matters most to people or what they value most is cardiac cover. And we can see the things that they value least, like travel for relatives, appendicitis. If we look at singles, single incomes, no kids, 24 to 44, it's no surprise that they put no value on an absence of access for children because they have no children. But what is interesting is they value very little, or if at all, travel for relatives. So that's the kind of cover that you don't have to actually include or budget for. If we look at young families, we can see obviously that they really value antenatal, and pregnancy. Older families don't really value antenatal at all. And if you look at baby boomers, what's very interesting is that they actually put a negative utility on the antenatal and pregnancy elements of the cover. That's telling us a few interesting things, one of which is you can actually charge more for the cover without those. And what's driving this? Perhaps they perceive that the package is selling them something that they don't need, so it's of less value. Or perhaps they perceive by offering them antenatal care and pregnancy care that you really don't understand them, that this offer this brand is not for them and doesn't understand them. Obviously, singles aren't interested in things like hip replacements, joint reconstructions. So if you exclude that, you see it doesn't have too much of an effect on share. Older families. We'll select and maximise. And we can see what's important to them. They've had their kids, so one of the things that the model tells us, which is fairly common sense, is they're not that interested in pregnancy and the related antenatal services. So removing those have absolutely no effect on market share. Interesting to note that if we look at boomers and maximise for boomers, we notice that sales and revenue and share actually drop. So these two features actually have negative utility, which is an important insight. So that means that offering this segment, this package, they either think that they're getting something they don't need, paying something for they don't need, or that the offering is not speaking to them, not their kind of product, and their willingness to pay is less. The market share is actually less with those features included in the package or included in the product. And let's look at another quite different problem. The model output here is quite simple because the exercise was a quite different and quite simple one. News Corporation wanted some science around the gut instinct that their magazine editors had about the elements of a magazine cover that optimised newsstand sales. So we presented respondents with a highly visual survey where we varied the attributes of a magazine cover. And they found that there was a significant difference in some of the elements of the cover, whether the masthead was solid white or a bleed through, the font used, the actual layout of the articles were presented in, and most importantly and interestingly, the background images. So we tested a range of background images. Obviously, they're going to have an effect, but the great thing about PCA, it was able to pick the clear winner. So one image was clearly superior, one image was clearly inferior. Around the table, there was probably a good common sense argument, a good I reckon argument for any of these images being appropriate or good or the best or something that would sell a magazine. But PCA takes the I reckon out of it. Science tells us that there was a clear winner as a cover image. So now let's quickly recap on the benefits and power of Managility PCA. With almost any product, there are lots of attributes you can change and tweak, meaning literally millions of permutations of your product. So which is the best? As we saw with the Winter Festival model, we can easily identify the optimum from a whole range of permutations. Key customer segments. Very often, the most important insights come from understanding your key segments. Key segments may make very different choices and value features quite differently, and that's very important information to know. As we saw in the retail insurance project, it's crucial to understand how to package and configure products differently for different segments. A feature that's highly valuable for a certain segment may have no value or even negative value for another segment. There's also understanding your demand curve, which is very hard to do based on historical data if, say, price has really travelled in a narrow band. If you have a new product or prices have historically remained within a range, how can you know what your demand curve looks like? What if you double prices? Will you lose half your customers or only 10%? And if you drop prices, what impact will that have on market share? We can identify tipping points on the demand curve and also price ranges in which it's quite inelastic or flat, where you can actually move price without much effect on share, which is good if you want to raise it, and ineffective if you want to decrease price to increase share. As we saw in the Winter Festival model, there's no real difference between an entry price of $5 and $10, really significant. So In that case, raising prices from $5 to $10 would increase revenue greatly with virtually no loss of volume. Conversely, if you're in a situation where your prices were at $10, you'd know that the strategy of dropping them to $5 to drive more demand would be ineffective. It would do virtually nothing to increase demand. And it's a huge benefit to acquire these insights by foresight rather than learn by your mistakes in market. Next, you can find out which are the features that are most important to your customers. So for example, in the Winter Festival model, the presence and size of the ice rink had the highest effects, while there were some arguably attractive features that had such little effect they weren't worth investing in, like the curling, like the children's zoo, etc. And of course, in the insurance example, we saw a couple of features that had negative utility, which is actually really important to identify. Predicting shifts in market share is another great benefit of the PCA and choice modelling methods. Now, while we haven't seen any direct examples in this presentation, we can actually test your product against real-world competitors, named real-world competitors, and see what effect changes in price, packaging or promotions will have on market share. The questions there the important questions there that we can answer are such as, to what extent will a new product cannibalize my existing product? And to what extent will it actually capture competitors' market share? As a result, we can actually measure the value of your brand. When testing your products and offerings against competitors, we can value your brand in actual dollar terms or in relative terms to your competitors. We can answer questions like, how much value does our brand add? How much more can we charge for the same configuration versus a generic brand, or versus any of our competitors, more or less? Because brand is really a feature like any other when we're creating models such as we do. We can accurately measure how much value customers place on your brand and also the brands of your competitors. So, how does a Managility project work? Well, first up, we hold a workshop to determine the objectives and define a model. Usually we'll start by asking you to imagine what the output would be, so that if you could have a dashboard, a model, a simulator in front of you, what would you want it to tell you? What questions do you want it to answer? So we'll show you some examples like those we've been through and start to get the ideas flowing. Once we've established the objectives and we're clear with what the interactive model that comes out the other end needs to look like, we'll create the online survey instrument and program the experiment. Then we'll recruit respondents based on the segments we're interested in. Then we run the actual survey and collect data. Next, we create the models and turn them into the interactive output that's easy for you to interrogate, as well as a report that you can use to communicate to external stakeholders and internal stakeholders. And the output is something that we freely give to you to do with what you will throughout your organisation. And in some cases lives for a very short time in terms of a particular event or a product launch. In some cases it can be used over the space of a year or more, where market and products are more static, to figure out how you can respond to the actions of your competitors, or what changes in price, promotion, packaging, etc. on your side should be made. Of course, throughout all of this, there's plenty of testing, there's plenty of stakeholder review, and the whole process can take as little as 2 weeks and can cost as little as $30,000. So the projects you've seen, the magazine project, the Winter Festival project, were simple projects on the low end of the price range. The insurance model was slightly more complex, so that would be not a $30,000 project, but more like a $50,000 project, because of the number of segments and therefore extra recruitment of respondents and extra models we had to create for that project. So what are the next steps? Next steps, if you want to know more, if you want to figure out whether there are some problems within your organisation or within your KPIs or things you're interested in that PCA can solve, talk to me. Contact me. I will send a follow-up email with my contact details to all of the attendees. And once we've identified an opportunity, we can conduct a requirements workshop to accurately assess the size and scope and cost and output and the benefit to your organisation. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope it was useful to you. Now we'll move on to the Q&A session. Please use the question feature on your go-to client to write any questions if you have, and I'll respond verbally. Okay, so Christian has asked, how is value assigned to the variables? Values are assigned to the variables by the model that predicts likelihood, the probability of choice. So the value is in utiles, units of utility that are sort of hypothetical until the moment that you have a price somewhere in the study. Then you can link everything back to price. So we can actually put a dollar value in terms of the price of an insurance policy on each of the features of that policy. So what's the contribution to willingness to pay $250 per month for health insurance? We can say that cardiac cover contributes $120, and for a certain segment, joint replacement only contributes a couple of dollars. The magic is all in the modelling. So once we have the experimental data of all these choices of a whole designed set of permutations, which are a subset of the maybe million permutations that might be out there, we can assign value to each attribute and each level of each attribute. If there are no further questions, we'll break it off here. As I said, I'll send all of you a follow-up email. That will have my contact details in it. And please, if you wish, use that as an opportunity to start a dialogue. Phone me, email me with any more in-depth questions you may have. And I'm sure as you percolate on what we've gone through today, which is a lot at a very high level, there's probably many questions you have about the exact applicability of PCA to your business and your situation. Thanks so much for attending. I'll end it here and look out for an email from me in the next 24 hours. Thank you all.